Hello everybody, and a privilege to be in your company again. Welcome to Viewpoint, where we try in every edition to discover the secrets of success of entrepreneurs and industry leaders, and the intention behind that is to give you the tools to apply and to manage in your own business. My name's Jeremy Maggs, and today we're going to deal with a critical component about the so-called business leadership journey. We're talking about personal development, personal growth, setting goals. How do you do that? How do you recalibrate when the goal isn't quite right and you need to reset the compass? Well, we've got an expert to talk to us about that today. Our guest needs no real introduction in that personal development space. He is successful in both the banking space and also has followed his passion, his dream, his desire, and his love of the culinary arts and also the wine industry. It is my great pleasure to welcome to Viewpoint Bodibe Sebolai, who is founder of Bodibe Wines and also a partner in African Culinary Library. I'm looking forward to the conversation. So Bodibe, a very warm welcome to you. Let's talk a little bit about growth and personal development. Interesting journey. A banker, you look like a banker, but you've also followed a very different path, which is your real passion. What is that path?
That path has been about food, which started with wine specifically. I started a wine brand promotion and marketing company, which evolved into running a wine store. And in doing some of those projects, my second love for food, which has always been there, kind of evolved with meeting some of my current business partners in some of the projects that we were doing, that we were finding each other in the same places.
What's your definition of passion when it comes to business? What drove you? What motivated you?
You know, it's for me, it was something that I consistently enjoy, right? That, you know, any day, you know, you'd ask me about wine, and I'm ready to share, even when I'm extremely tired. You know what I mean?
So it's not going to work in other words.
No. It's something that feels effortless. Something that you also do, you know, naturally off the cuff. You know, if you're bored, what do you look around at? You know, what kind of magazines does one buy? You know, when you have your spare time. So that for me was when I looked at myself. What are the things I like? You know what I mean? That I can capitalize on. You know, wine, food was, you know, where I spend most of my time. In African Culinary Library is a formation of a couple of businesses and business partners that came together. As I said, when I started Bodibe Wine Collection in a couple of years back, I think around 2017, 2018, 2016 it was, I then started collaborating with my current business partners who run a company called Fresh Yum, and one runs a company called The Local Grill, which is out in Parktown North. In the environments that we're at, we're always saying, you know, how do we promote African cuisine? You know what I mean? How do we talk about African cuisine in the same spectrum as Italian cuisine is spoken about? And one thing
and elevating it.
Elevating it to the same levels, right? And you'd realize that all those food types, when you talk about Italian food or French cuisine, have a spectrum. A spectrum in the sense that you've got food at an entry-level base where the old mama on the street will make you pizza or a pasta, right?
Which is delicious.
Which is delicious, but you can also have pizza at a high-end restaurant.
Precisely.
Yes. So African cuisine ranges in the same in the same spectrum. But for some odd reason, we always seem to talk about African food and African cuisine as only on the entry level and intermediate, right? We never really try and elevate it to that level. So it's something we kept on talking about. How do we do this? How do we do this? And one of our business partners, being Vusin Glover, who's our creative and head chef for African Culinary Library, had gone to Milan, and one of the things when you got there cooking for Prada, they asked him, show us African cuisine. You know what I mean? And it's the constant question that comes up, right? And he is trained as a fine dining chef. So that in that shared experience brought us together to build what we call African Library. And our aim is to try and influence, right, and promote African cuisine through the spectrum, similar to how Michelin stars would promote all these other types of cuisines.
Do you have a set of rules or tick boxes when it comes to personal growth? And I guess part of the rules and the tick boxes is also a blueprint. Do you know where you're going to be? Is that the secret of personal growth, is having a compass, a direction?
Yeah. I personally do. I think even over the years, I've learned to do what we call vision boards, over time. I think when I learned about the concept, it helps one clarify where you're going.
Remind us what it is and what you do. What is a vision board?
So a vision board is where you determine where you want to go, you know, where do you want to be in whatever time you want to be.
And illustrate.
And then, and illustrate it through pictures, right? So you will try and crystallize that vision by pictures. So simply when I started, I was like, I'd love to have a house, you know, in Bryanston, and must have these. I'd want to have a vintage Porsche. You know what I mean? I want to, get a master's degree all the way to a PhD. So I put all those things on a vision board and then worked out a plan as to, okay, fine, if I need to do those things, how do I get to start doing them?
Have you got the Porsche?
Not yet, no.
Okay, I'm holding thumbs. There are 3 principles, I think, that guide a personal growth journey. One is experience and what you learn from experience. The second thing, and you did allude to it with Zweli Manyati, is about having a mentor, or at least someone that you can derive wisdom from. And then it's your own ecosystem, it's your friends, it's your family. Let's talk about experience first. The more experienced you become, the more wisdom you gain, the more fuel that adds to your personal growth journey. But also within that experience, and this is something we've spoken about so often on Viewpoint, it's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have.
Yeah. Even though it's a hard thing to get used to, because your natural inclination as a person is to do something perfect the first time around. We don't want to be associated with failure, or you find failure as a hard thing. But as you say, the older you get, the more you realize you have to learn from those mistakes. And a classic example is you start a business on your own and you realize that on your own you can't make it to the vision that you need to. You have to then get people in to assist in building what you're building. It can be quite hard because you have to allow other people's minds to contribute to what you had in mind.
And that's going to lead to another question in a moment about personal growth and leadership, because in leadership, the people that are part of that journey are also part of the critical ecosystem. Yeah. But let's talk about mentors now. How important has that process been for you?
It's been very...
And how do you use a mentor?
It's been very important, and it's also a very difficult environment, to be honest. I started at a young age with mentors and guys that I looked at that had achieved in areas where I wanted to be. One of my first mentors, and I've found it hard after him to find a much more stable mentor, was Lawton Glover. Lawton Glover at the time was the deputy chairperson of Nedbank at the time. And I think there was some chemistry that was struck between him and I. And he was a very calm and almost like, a teacher, a network teacher at heart. So he was one guy who was really open to say, let me show you how this is done. Always make time in his busy schedule to go through and actually get more involved in who you are and more understanding of where you're trying to be, and really caution you on the decisions you're about to make.
I'm very proud that I have reached the point in my life where I am mentoring 2 people. Yeah. And the one piece of advice I've given them is that you as the mentee have to work the relationship.
Yeah.
Is that it's critical, and I think this is so important in that personal growth journey, is that you can't expect that person to do all the lifting for you.
Yeah.
You've got to make the calls, you've got to set the meetings, you've got to come with an agenda, you've got to open yourself up, you've got to be as honest as you can. Talk to me a little bit about that, how important managing the relationship of mentorship is.
It is important because, and I think in that you show your drive and your real intention and your real potential at in that relationship. And I think when you drive the relationship, the mentor becomes responsive and starts going in the direction you're going in. So I've experienced that with Lawton Globe and some guys that I've engaged. Is if you make a call and you say, hey, I'm not sure how to make this particular decision, they're able to reach out from their bags and say, okay, this is how it is. The more you drive it,
come up with solutions yourself.
Yes.
And discuss it. Don't expect them, as I've just said, to do all the work.
Yes, yes. But it's almost like a therapy discussion at some point. You know what I mean? It's. I find that you sit there and you explain to this, and he says, but why are you not doing this? Why did you not think about that? Not always providing you the answers, but also questioning you, intently to help you figure out for yourself. Because what I realize is that, if somebody gives you advice and you want to do something in the way they imagine it, it's harder to execute, right? If it's not necessarily organic or you don't organically understand what it is you're trying to achieve.
You've spoken very warmly about your business partners, but again, on that personal growth journey, what about friends and family? Are they important? How do you bring them into the process? How do you make sure that they don't drown in the process as well? Because you got to have a wall, haven't you?
Yeah.
Or at least a fence.
Yeah, sure. It's a very tough one, especially with one who's got wife and kids and very young kids at that. You look. I tend to lose time with my friends, and again with the vision board, you tend to prioritize the things that are there, right? So I have a ritual about when I leave the house, right? Whatever time I spend must be worthy to be away from my kids and my wife, right? That will be one. The other part is to always even engage with my wife about the business discussions that we have, you know what I mean? The decisions we're about to make, so that she's also part of the journey, you know what I mean, and contribute. So it's not you don't always have the separation of, okay, I get home and you know, I have to try and be somebody else at home. I try and have those conversations. Sometimes she's not willing, you know what I mean, because it's just too much to deal with. But it allows her to support in her understanding of what one is doing. I mean, the other part of the support structure is parents. My dad has always been an entrepreneur himself, built his own business, so he's someone who understands. Yeah. He's someone who understands, always gives advice, you know, and his always thing is try it and see how far you can get with something, you know what I mean. And then if it doesn't work, you'll try and do something else.
What's your work ethic like? Are you 24/7, or do you find time? Do you find downtime?
So I do struggle to find downtime, because I struggle mentally just to switch off, right? Because you're so engaged throughout. But what I've managed over time is I only work fully during the week, right, and then dedicate my weekends to family. Yeah.
But you'll take the call if you have to on a Saturday or Sunday.
Yeah, I do ask. Yes,
Yeah.
I do ask just to segregate certain hours in that time just to be able to take a call.
Part of the development and the growth journey that we've been talking about is predicated, as we discussed at the beginning of this conversation, on enthusiasm, on passion, on the desire to succeed. But there has either come a time, or there will come a time, when the spark starts to diminish slightly. There's nothing wrong with that, it does. Maybe it's happened to you already, maybe it's still to happen to you. How do you keep the flame alive? Have you worked that out yet?
Sure, it's a tough one. So there's one thing that happens, right, in that period where I become quite disorganized and easily distracted when my goal is no longer very clear. Right, it really affects me emotionally and physically, right? So the minute I recognize that situation, I'm always striving to go back to what did I say I was going to do, right? And there's one thing
back to the vision board.
Back to the vision board. But there's one thing that my dad always said to me was, going through tough times and not continuing with the plan, the next year you're going to come back and say, how do I find myself here again? And that always sits in my mind and saying, life will always happen to you. You just need to stay the course and look at and try and, whatever happens, try and get up and do what you need to do.
With the caveat, I accept that 90%, with the caveat that the plan can change organically while you're implementing it. There's nothing wrong with pivoting.
Yeah. It's the plan is really the end goal, right? What are you doing today to achieve the end goal? You might have chose the means, right? But you can variate the means at that point in time to figure out how you get to the goal.
But sometimes the end goal also changes along the journey, doesn't it?
I try not to, because I fear and one thing I've shared with my friends, I fear the shifting goals, that then you never really get to achieve anything. You know what I mean?
It can be a cop-out.
Yes. You never really get to achieve anything, because if you shift it because of, times are tough, you know what I mean, then you never really achieve anything. The goals change and you're always further from your goal than when you started.
Okay, that's your journey. Now let's talk about your ecosystem. Part of your job as a leader is to make sure that you are developing those people around you.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
I try and look for young staff. That will be one. Staff that have a desire to grow and become something. How do
you recognize that quality?
Interviews, right? And that's one thing we're talking about, experience, right? Having worked for the bank, having led some teams, you get quite used to interviewing people. The one thing I learned in that process is you look for people who have a fire about them coming to interviews, and those who are well prepared and they've got the right degrees or whatever it is. The people who are really going to make a success are people who are really hungry. Right. So, an ex CEO of mine always said, he once hired a waitress who became a successful banker, right? But when we got on hire, we look for Jeremy with the right qualifications for the role, and would take years to try and find the right people. And he says, if you find those people, you're able to work with them. There are a lot of times where you work with people that you can't even motivate when their main aim is just get a salary at the end of the day and go home.
And sometimes it's just serendipity, it's just chemistry, isn't
That's true. That's true, right? It's just you have that frame formula, but sometimes you meet somebody, you connect, and then you make the decision on that basis.
In the personal development of others, again, you'll also make mistakes. What have you learnt on that journey?
Learn to cut ties at the right time, right? And the one way to phrase it that I learned over time is, if you make an investment, you create an investment floor, right? If the share drops below that floor or hits that floor, you need to let it go, right? Because a lot of times you get emotionally involved with people, you get emotionally involved with staff, you get highly invested, that even when you know they've broken the floor, you know what I mean, your floor, you tend to go far with them, and that's just detrimental for everyone. So
but the fundamental learning there is that they are staff. They're
Yes.
not necessarily your friends.
yes, yes.
And people conflate the two sometimes,
Yes.
and that's dangerous.
Yes. So that idea that you're investing in someone, right, is that investment, you know, bringing a return? For so long as you have to let it go.
Final question then, aside from the vintage Porsche, and I have every expectation of a ride once you get it, what about the rest of the personal growth journey? I'm assuming that if it was a step ladder we're talking about, you're some way up that step ladder. You have achieved certain goals, you have more goals to achieve. How do you keep accelerating on?
So maybe the one thing that changes is in terms of your goals is the purpose and meaning of your goals. So the Porsche no longer became something that had great purpose. What drives me now is building a bigger organization that can have an impact in the country and the world. And it's personal to me because it's one of those things where I've got a son and daughters who I one day want to say that's, you know, what you can achieve. So that for me, having kids has sort of slightly changed it to saying, what do you really want to leave behind as a legacy for your child? How do you want people to really look at what you've done? So it's trying to find meaning in what you do, and the goal is much more bigger, to really have ACL. You have can kind of really achieve the goal of impacting the world and improving what African cuisine looks like, and making it a bigger organization than what we said.
I wish you nothing but personal success.
Thank you so much.
In your continuing journey. So interesting, and thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you.